You were genuinely happy for them. And then you got in your car or closed your front door and realized nothing in your own life had changed. That's the part that makes this so complicated. You were there when they got the call, when the test came back clear, when the relationship finally became what they'd been praying for, when the door opened that had been closed for so long, and you celebrated with them, not performatively, for real, because you love them, because their answer was good news, because part of you believed that watching God move for someone close to you was evidence he could move for you too. But they went home, and you went home, and in the quiet of your own house, with your own unanswered prayer still sitting exactly where you left it, something in you shifted, not into bitterness. You don't want it to be bitterness, but into a tiredness that's hard to name. The tiredness of being the one who is still waiting, still here, still carrying the same request you've been carrying while everyone around you seems to be moving into what they prayed for. And you've done the right things with that feeling. You've prayed through it, chosen gratitude, recommitted to trust, and then the next announcement comes. Another answer, another person stepping into what you've been asking for. And you do it all again, each time costing a little more than the time before. Because hope that keeps getting renewed and keeps getting deferred doesn't just hurt. It exhausts, and you're tired in a way that's different from doubt. You still believe. You just don't know how much longer you can keep believing in this particular way. Here's what no one talks about in the waiting. The comparison isn't the enemy you think it is. You've been told not to compare, to stay in your own lane, to trust that God has a different timeline for everyone. And you've tried, but comparison isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's just what happens when you're in community. You can't be close to people without knowing their stories. And when their stories include the thing you've been praying for, the marriage, the pregnancy, the healing, the provision, the breakthrough, the proximity to their answer makes yours feel further away. Not because you want less for them, because you want it too. And wanting it while watching them receive it is one of the most specific kinds of pain there is. The kind that has no clean outlet. Because you can't grieve it openly without sounding like you resent them. And you don't resent them. You love them. You just also feel the weight of being the one still standing in the same place, while the people around you move. And every answer prayer around you is a reminder that it's possible. And a reminder that for you, so far, it hasn't happened. Both of those things are true at the same time. And carrying both of them, every time someone else's prayer gets answered, is slowly wearing you down. Here's something worth sitting with. The people in Scripture who receive the most significant answers to prayer almost never receive them on the same timeline as the people around them. They were almost always the ones who waited longer. Not because they were less faithful, because what God was building through their waiting couldn't be built any other way. Abraham waited decades while others around him built families and legacies. Hannah waited years while other women in her household were not waiting. The contrast was part of the story, not accidental, not cruel, purposeful in ways that only became visible from the other side. And here's what's true about the people who wait longer than everyone around them. They develop something the people who received quickly never had to develop. A trust that holds without confirmation. A faith that becomes genuinely unconditional. Not because it said it was, but because it was tested at the exact point where conditions ran out. And it almost always requires the particular discomfort of watching others receive while you continue to wait. Not to punish you, because that discomfort is the exact pressure that produces what nothing else can. What if your waiting is not evidence that your answer isn't coming? What if the waiting has less to do with what you're receiving, and more to do with who you're becoming while you wait? Because not every answer is the same weight. Some prayers get answered quickly because the answer is straightforward. And some prayers, the ones attached to something significant, something that will require a version of you that doesn't exist yet, those take longer. Not because God forgot, because the answer and the person receiving it have to arrive at the same place at the same time. The waiting isn't exposing a flaw in you. It's forming something in you, not as a criticism, as a statement about the size of what's coming. The preparation for something significant takes longer than the preparation for something ordinary. And the waiting you've been in, the extended, comparative, exhausting waiting, might be the most accurate indicator you have of the significance of what's on the other side. The people around you who received quickly received something that fit who they already were. What's coming for you may require who you're becoming. And who you're becoming is being formed right now, in the waiting that hasn't ended, in the hoping that keeps getting renewed, in the celebrating of others that costs you more than anyone knows. That's not delay. That's the specific work of preparation. And it's happening whether you can feel it or not. Think about two seeds planted in the same garden on the same day. One breaks the surface in a week. The other stays underground for a month. And if you're watching the garden, you start to wonder about the second seed. Whether it's defective, whether something went wrong, whether it's going to come up at all. But underground, the second seed is developing a root system that the first one never had time to build. Because the longer the germination takes, the deeper the roots go before the plant has to support anything above the surface. And when it finally breaks through, it comes up stronger, more anchored, more prepared for what the garden is going to require of it. The delay wasn't effect. It was depth. And you're the second seed, not defective, not forgotten, not evidence that the gardener has favorites. You are the one whose roots are going deeper than what a quick answer would have allowed. And the waiting that has felt like being left behind is actually the specific process that makes what's coming sustainable. You're not behind. You're being built for something that requires the foundation you're developing right now. In the ground, in the quiet, in the waiting that no one else can see. Hannah prayed for a child while Peninnah had children. That's the specific cruelty of her situation. It wasn't just that Hannah was waiting. It was that she was waiting inside a household where someone else had already received what she was asking for. Every day, at the same table, in the same home, the answered prayer of someone close to her was a constant, unavoidable reminder of her own unanswered one. And Peninnah provoked her, year after year, trip after trip to the temple. The text says it happened every year. This ritual of Hannah arriving at the place of worship already broken before she got there. And Elkanah, who loved her, didn't understand. He meant well, but he couldn't feel what she was carrying. Because what she was carrying wasn't just the absence of a child. It was the specific weight of wanting something everyone around her seemed to have and not being able to explain why the wanting didn't go away. And one year at the temple, she poured out her soul. Not a polished request. Everything she had, all of it, released onto the altar. The priest thought she was drunk. That's how undone she was. And God heard her, not after she composed herself, in the pouring out. And Hannah went home and ate. And her face was no longer sad. Before the answer, before the pregnancy, something broke open in the act of being completely honest with God. And in his timing, his specific, unhurried, purposeful timing, the answer came. Her son was Samuel. But long before Samuel was born, God had already begun changing Hannah. The waiting had been forming someone the answer alone never could. So here's what I want to say to you directly. You're not the person God skipped. You're not someone whose prayer is in a pile somewhere that he hasn't gotten to. You're not evidence that some people just don't receive what others do. You're someone in the middle of a wait that has a specific purpose. And the celebrating you've done. Every time you showed up for someone else's answer while carrying your own unanswered prayer that has not been invisible. That's one of the most costly and least recognized acts of faith there is. Celebrating what you're still waiting for. And the God who sees what no one else sees has seen every moment of it. Every celebration that cost you. Every announcement you received with genuine joy and privately carried home. He sees it, and he has not moved on from your prayer. He is still working. In the waiting you can't see the end of. In the roots going deeper than a quick answer would have allowed. What's coming is worth what the waiting is costing. Before you go, type these words in the comments. My wait is not the end of my story. Not as a declaration that the feeling has caught up with the faith, but as a choice. A choice to believe that the ground you're standing on right now, the waiting ground, the tired ground, the celebrated everyone else again ground, is not where your story ends. It's where it's still being written. And the God who wept before he called Lazarus out, he has not forgotten your name. He has not forgotten what you've been carrying. And he is not done.